Who's the most popular politician on the left?
AOC? I don't know.
One of, but who's, you know, Bernie is,
Bernie, yeah.
Bernie is, I mean, he's not a capitalist, you know?
No, he's not. And he's also not president.
He's not, but
never would be.
But neither is Mamdani.
No, no, but he will, trust me, he will be featured in the campaign commercials.
But they're going to feature people, they boogeyman everybody.
Yeah, but you don't have to boogeyman him.
And on the other side, you have the guy running in New York, Mamdani, right? Okay, who's like a straight-up communist. I mean, he is. He talks about, you know, the thing.
Bill Maher escalates his critique, dismissing Mamdani's socialist framework as a political fantasy detached from reality, arguing that its promises collapse when exposed to the pressures of real-world economics, governance, and practical implementation.
Finally, New World Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? And if you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years.
In a fast-cut montage of real-time moments, Bill Maher unloads on Mamdani's proposal for free groceries, free public transport, and tuition-free education, dismissing it as a feel-good mirage that sounds appealing on paper but unravels under the weight of real economic constraints. His commentary hits hard and stays relentless, framing the agenda as politically seductive yet structurally unworkable, before the clip abruptly snaps into a deeper, more intense analysis segment.
The whole left side of the country catches socialism fever. Let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, "If the party didn't shift to the center, we will get fucking torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again." Well, she was right, but they didn't listen.
Bill Maher delivers a blunt warning, suggesting that if Democrats align too closely with Mamdani's emerging socialist-leaning wave ahead of 2028, they could be steering themselves toward a political blow-up that hands Republicans an easy path to victory. He argues that while the messaging may fire up the progressive base, it risks repelling swing voters and independents when tested on a national stage. In his assessment, what appears like rising momentum within one faction of the party could quickly unravel in a general election, leaving Democrats politically exposed and strategically outmatched.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move.
Bill Maher points to recent election results as proof that ticket splitting is still very much alive, with voters backing Trump at the top while still choosing more moderate Democrats in down-ballot races. He cites contests such as North Carolina's governor race, the Wisconsin Senate battle, and Michigan House outcomes as examples of electorates rewarding centrist positioning even in competitive or Republican-leaning territory. In his reading, the pattern sends a clear warning to Democrats. Pragmatism and moderation can still break through in swing states, but more ideologically left messaging risks losing traction once it moves beyond the core base.
Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to.
Bill Maher draws on historical comparisons such as the Soviet Union and Venezuela to argue that large-scale socialist systems have repeatedly failed in practice, often leading to economic decline, shortages, and political instability. He suggests that these outcomes are well understood by the American public, making it unlikely that similar models would gain broad national support. In his view, a Democratic nominee closely aligned with socialist-style policies could trigger a strong backlash from moderates, independents, and crossover voters in a general election, ultimately weakening the party's chances of winning.
Capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chávez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century or any century.
Critics such as Bill Maher argue that significant parts of the Democratic Party are drifting too far left, cautioning that policies tied to democratic socialism could turn away swing voters and create real electoral vulnerability in a national contest. They draw a clear line between progressive figures and more centrist Democrats, suggesting that candidates closer to traditional market-oriented economics are likely to resonate more broadly across competitive and undecided voters, particularly in battleground states. From their perspective, the real divide is not just ideological branding but electability itself, with the debate over the government's role in shaping the economy sitting at the center of the political fault line.
New York is New York. It's definitely it's the media capital, the financial capital. It is a bellwether like no other city is in this country. So don't tell me that who the mayor of New York is doesn't matter.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Do you think, let's say, on the seize the means of production, do you think that the mayor, that one person, if he is a democratic socialist, do you think that he would have the power and influence to be able to, like, usher in social?
Some critics argue that a president with strong democratic socialist-leaning priorities could still influence U.S. policy in a gradual way through appointments, regulatory shifts, and negotiated legislation, particularly if backed by sympathetic members of Congress. Others counter that America's system of checks and balances, including Congress, the courts, federalism, and internal party divisions, makes any sustained one-direction transformation far more difficult to achieve. In their view, the ultimate direction of policy would depend less on a leader's ideology alone and more on broader public support, institutional resistance, and the practical limits built into the political system.
Has the power and influence to elect J.D. Vance or whoever is the Republican candidate next time. It is a walking commercial for the Republican Party
I think
nationally.
the Republicans are going to...
When you let the Democrats, socialists, and now they're actually calling themselves socialists, when you let them take over a major American city, this is what you get. The state-run grocery stores, which worked so well in Cuba and the Soviet Union and Venezuela, just bad ideas. And again, this ugly streak, streak of anti...
Critics like Bill Maher argue that Democrats face a major electability risk if they lean too heavily into democratic socialist branding, warning that it would give opponents simple, emotionally charged attack lines about government control and comparisons to failed socialist states that could dominate a general election narrative. However, political analysts note that voter attitudes are often more nuanced than campaign messaging suggests, since many Americans reject the socialism label while still supporting specific policies like expanded healthcare, paid leave, and stronger social safety nets, meaning the real electoral impact depends less on ideological labels and more on how clearly and practically those policies are framed to everyday concerns.
Most popular politician on the left.
AOC? I don't know.
One of, but who's Bernie is
Bernie, yeah.
Bernie is, I mean, he's not a capitalist, you know?
No, he's not. And he's also not president.
He's not, but
never would be.
But neither is Mamdani.
No, but he will, trust me, he will be featured in the campaign commercials.
But they're going to feature people, they boogeyman everybody.
Yeah, but you don't have to boogeyman him. He does it to himself.
But they'll do it regardless. Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, but
they make anybody into boogeyman.
It has.
I think it was
just have more weight when it's.
Critics argue that the Republican messaging apparatus is highly effective at reframing Democratic candidates into simplified political boogeymen, often amplifying or selectively portraying records to build emotionally charged narratives that resonate with voters. They point to past elections in which figures such as Obama, Clinton, and Pelosi became central targets of sustained negative branding, regardless of the nuance or accuracy behind those portrayals. In the case of a more openly progressive or democratic socialist candidate, they argue the challenge for Democrats becomes more immediate, since clearly stated policy positions can be easier to isolate and attack without needing reinterpretation. Supporters counter that this same clarity can also work in their favor, suggesting that direct, unambiguous messaging may strengthen enthusiasm among parts of the electorate, even if it increases exposure among swing voters.
It must be horrible for a guy like you, who you spent your whole life talking about how government tries to do too much, which it does, and spends too much. And here you have Trump, who is the Republican, who is aggrandizing more power than anybody, as we just talked about. And on the other side, you have the guy running in New York, Mamdani, right? Okay, who's like a straight-up communist. I mean, he is. He talks about, the things that communists say. I mean, he wants free grocery stores, free buses.
I want him to win.
You want him to win?
Yeah.
Critics of socialism point to historical cases such as the Soviet Union, Cuba, and Venezuela as examples of how centrally planned or heavily state-directed economies have struggled in practice, often citing outcomes like chronic shortages, inefficiencies, reduced productivity, and lower living standards compared to more market-based systems. However, others argue that these outcomes cannot be understood in isolation, noting that factors such as international sanctions, trade restrictions, political isolation, inherited economic conditions, and internal governance decisions have all played significant roles in shaping these trajectories. More broadly, many economists emphasize that most modern economies operate as mixed systems rather than pure ideological models.